Okay, hello, everybody. It is 7:32. I am calling to order the meeting of Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee. It is April 7th, and it is 7:33. We have not a formal chock full agenda, but just a lot of things to get updated on and have an opportunity to get everybody together. It's been a while, and we have quite a few things to just make sure we're all watching topics that are happening in town and to be coming down the pike, and just an opportunity to have Jeremy Ginsburg with us to chat about the whole host of things. So with that, if I can, first order of business is to approve the minutes from January 13th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Amy.
Okay, Michael, a second?
Mike.
Mike, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approve?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Abstentions? Okay, all right. All right, so that is done. Okay, next on the agenda is an opportunity for us to get updated on a couple of things in town. Jeremy Ginsburg is with us, and there's a whole host of things, Jeremy, that I'd love, if I can, just kind of outline some of the things I'd like to hit on, and then of course open to what you believe we should be paying attention to, and then open it, as we go, if anybody else wants to, add on at the end. But we've got a couple of things for the committee to look at. As we know, the town has to develop an affordable housing plan by, I think, July 1st. And there's been some progress on that. Jeremy can give us an update on that. Since we've last met, there's been an approval on the Parklands project, as well as some meaningful changes with the Palmer's project. Then there's also been, since our last discussions, new proposed legislation 2.0 from the state with regards to a whole host of issues with regards to zoning changes that are being proposed at the state level that could change some things here for municipalities, including Darien. So those are the things that I'd like to hit on, and then obviously open it up to other questions. So Jeremy, if you can, I'm going to turn the floor to you to synthesize some of those topics for us.
Sure. We'll start with the affordable housing plan. Back in 2017, the legislature passed a bill requiring every community in the state to have an affordable housing plan done by June of 2022. And at that time, we had just finished here in Darien working on our town plan of conservation and development. So what we've done is just got started with our affordable housing plan. The state statute is 8-30J, and the statute is very brief. It gives communities a lot of flexibility in how they want to approach this project. My understanding is at this point, only 18 out of 169 communities have completed their plans, which is not unexpected. We still have a few months to go. We are, I'll say, about a third to a half a way through the plan. We have put together a website, which is really the place for people to go to get more information. So I'll give that to you now. It's a link from the Darien website, darienct.gov/AH-plan. And on that web page that we've created, we have all the draft chapters that the commission has prepared, discussed. We have a lot of helpful resource information, the statute, some of the data from the state. We have plans from other communities, Essex, Fairfield, Newington, I think are three that come to mind. So really it's kind of a one-stop resource for people that are interested in the plan, interested in some of the data and background that the commission might be using, or at least wants people to be aware of. WestCog has put together 136 pages of resource information covering the entire region, which I found very interesting, covering a variety of topics related to housing. And we've linked to that on the plan. So the commission is, since January, met once a month. In fact, it most recently was this past Tuesday, April 5th, to discuss the draft chapters that they've put together, get feedback, input. So what I would suggest to people, the best way to get involved is to go on that website, look at what's been done, and send the commission an email. We've put up an email link, an email address that people can use to send in their ideas and comments, suggestions. And the reason we posted the plans of other communities and the WestCog plan and some of the data is it really gives people an opportunity to become informed, to see what ideas, thoughts, recommendations are out there. The draft chapters give people a little background on what's been going on in Darien. The most recent chapter is called Land Use and Zoning Assessment. Gives a little bit of the history of zoning in Darien relative to housing, some of the changes that have been done recently relative to multifamily housing, housing diversity. In the prior chapter, we talked about some of the redevelopment projects that were done at the Heights of Darien and the Royal at Darien, some of the private non-housing authority projects. Much of the conversation and discussion, really 1985 was a big turning point. And Mike Castello, you were here. People don't understand how controversial allowing condominiums was back in 1985. That, when you talk about some of the controversial decisions in Darien's history, from what I understand, that was one of the top in terms of controversy, whether to allow condominiums. And so people don't, nowadays you wouldn't look at it that way, but certainly at the time in the 80s. And that really changed. And it resulted in about 200 condominiums being built throughout town. So the commission is, as I said, meeting about once a month. Keep an eye on their agenda. We post all their agendas to the town website Thursday afternoons before a Tuesday meeting. It's likely that they'll next get to the plan. I would guess May 3rd or May 10th would be my guess, but there's plenty of opportunity for people to go on that webpage and email the commission with whatever thoughts, input, feedback. Of course, you're welcome to come to a meeting, but emails are welcomed as well. So as I said, we're making progress on this, and we'll continue to do work on it. Again, the state's required that it get done in a few months from now, so we're proceeding in that like many other communities are at this time.
And as of Tuesday, you're back in person.
Yes, Tuesday was our first meeting back since March of 2020, and it seemed to go well. It's a little tricky because we might have to move some meetings around the building. So I think one of our upcoming meetings is actually going to be in the Mather Center. But it was good to have everyone back. It's a lot more efficient, especially for a lot of back and forth with experts and testimony and things. It seemed to me, at least, to be much more efficient to be live than virtual. So,
Okay.
So we'll see how long that lasts.
Yep. I would also just add on to that I would encourage you all to take a look at that tab, because it is a terrific summary of the affordable housing that Darien has and diversity that Darien has been able to do through the years, through the decades. And when you see it in one repository document, it's pretty impressive. So I would encourage you all to look at that. Okay. Okay. What would you like to tackle next, Jeremy?
Amy,
One
can
other
you
thing,
put that in the chat space in the chat so everybody, if anybody didn't get it.
Yep. I'll do that now.
Thanks.
Okay. The other thing that occurred this past Tuesday was the appointment of a new zoning enforcement officer. As many of you know, Dave Keating with the town of Darien was hired as the zoning officer, I think 1983, somewhere around there. So he was zoning enforcement officer for 38 plus years. He retired on December 31st last year. So we've been looking for Dave's replacement for about 5 or 6 years now, or 5 or 6 months rather. Seems like 5 or 6 years when someone's got to do the work. And we just hired this gentleman, Hervé Amon. Hervé is French, but he's been has a lot of good experience. He's an architect, used to work up in Westport. He's familiar with Fairfield County. Most recently, he was a planner down in Maryland. He decided to move closer to family here in Connecticut, and he's jumped right in with both feet. I'm very impressed with his enthusiasm, willingness to learn the community, willingness to try to see what he can do to help. And he'll be serving as zoning enforcement officer, working closely with the Architecture Review Board, reviewing zoning permits. So it's what we lose is the institutional knowledge of someone who's worked in town 38 years, knows every street, knows every house, knows every permit. But on the other hand, you're getting a new, fresh perspective. He brings a lot of expertise in terms of flooding. He's a certified floodplain manager, I believe, architect, so he can read and draw plans. So we're excited about that. It's one more person to move things along and assist the ARB. So that we're excited, and hopefully that's the end of our staff changes for a while. The other item that was discussed, April 5th, David Genovese made an hour-long presentation to the commission. It's a shame, Mike, because that was the one thing that is always good when you hear David talk about his projects and how they're coming along. I'll give you a brief summary here. As you can see, he's working now on the north side of Corbin Drive. There's 3 buildings on the north side. The one furthest south, which is the former location of Tibbetts law offices. That building's obviously up and framed and moving along quickly. David hopes to have people in that building in a few months over the summer. The other 2 buildings, the building at the corner of Post Road in Corbin, the former gas station, will be the Bank of America on the first floor. There'll be a little drive-through there. And he expects to have that open December. And then there'll be a building in between them, which I think is going to be for Barrett Bookstore and maybe 1 or 2 other retail tenants. And as part of that construction, there'll be 2 driveways to get from the post office to the Goose in 1020 Post. You'll be able to drive right through. So that will help traffic flow a little bit through there. Then when all those people are, I'll call it, moved across the street, next year, David will start demolishing, I'll call it the Corbin block, the post office, the Corbin building, toy store, the toy shop, all the way down. And that will take about a year and a half. He's pre-leased many of the retail and restaurant spaces in phase 2. There's a number of restaurants, and I'll let David do the announcing, or you can always go to his website, the Corbin District, and see what restaurants he's formally announced or retail stores. But it's a very impressive mix. It's in many ways, it'll be a nice outdoor space where you can just walk up and stroll up and down, coffee shops, restaurants, stores. It'll be great when it's done, a big change. And we're going to eliminate that backup parking on the post road. So it'll be much safer. So while things are certainly inconvenient downtown and dusty and not great to look at today, sorry to say it's going to be another year and a half or 2 years, but when the project's done, it will really change what's there now. If for those people that have not been in that Corbin building, at the corner of Post and Corbin, I would invite you to walk into that office building. It is definitely circa 1960. Anyone who's been in the building, I always tell people it looks like a scene out of Mad Men, with the elevators, and it's the walls are turquoise, and there's ashtrays right by the elevators like there would have been in 1960. So to me, that's when you go in the building, it's kind of you look around and say, this is the way it was. But it's time for a refresh. And David's very excited because he's finally moving along after many, many years of accumulating these properties. 1020 Post was really his first venture in downtown, and that was a big success. So good news is we're well underway, but the bad news is we're not even halfway done. So go to David's website, Corbin District, where he talks about some of the tenants. And I saw that Garden Catering was mentioned in the Darien Times. And David said he's gotten more compliments about Garden Catering than many of his tenants. And if you haven't been to Garden Catering, it's a chicken nugget place here in Norwalk. It's very nice, but it's not. So exciting times for downtown. Let's talk about Federal Realty for a minute. Over in Norotan Heights, the block between Edgerton Street and Norotan Avenue. As you can see, they're moving along. And obviously the Walgreens has been done for a while now. The Stop and Shop's been gone. And they too are announcing a number of new restaurant tenants. They have announced Van Leeuwen Ice Cream, Gregory's Coffee, Tartinery. What other restaurants? 2 Italian restaurants. So they are moving along. They do hope to start moving retail and restaurant spaces in over the summer. I was just speaking to them about the apartments, and those two, they're going to start strongly marketing those over the next month or two, pre-leasing, if you will. So that project is moving along. I would expect that they will be all done. We're in April, December. This year they want to move it along. So that part of Norotan Heights will be cleaned up soon. It's still obviously a construction zone.
Can I ask you a question about that Federal? So having driven by there, I think everything's much higher, all the new stuff, which is important because of all the flooding down there. Is anything being done as far as using any of the flood mitigation or FEMA money to try to get the Vivalas, Leary's, that building raised up? Because it's really low now when you see it next to the building where like the Citibank used to be right next to it. I don't know if you've driven by that side of it recently.
No, I have. It's funny you mentioned that, Amy. From West Avenue, they've done a very, if you've seen it from West Avenue, they've done this very interesting look. It looks like the way they described it to us was a brownstone in Brooklyn, where you're walking down the street with trees. And from the Heights Road side, you're craning your neck like, wow, this is the retail restaurant space seems to be unnecessarily large, let's call it. But I do not know, the rumor I heard, and I do not know if it's true, some of you might know, is that Federal Realty was buying those buildings, and I don't know if that's true or not. But that might be an opportunity for those buildings to be redone, so to speak. I will say, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Amy, as part of the Federal Realty project, they did put in a substantial amount of drainage, which was an integral part of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval, to try to minimize flooding impacts, not eliminate, but minimize and reduce, which is a good thing. So I don't know what the future of those buildings is going to be. I do hope there is something like you mentioned that can be done to make that better and more viable.
Yeah, I just hope they'll go up because it looks ridiculous now, and they're just going to flood again. I don't know why they keep redoing their retail space, frankly, but I'm not a business person down there. Thanks.
I think Priscilla, do you have your hand up?
I do. I have a question about that also. From what I understand, and it may just have to do with the fact that it's not finished yet, but there's underground parking, and apparently that has been flooding.
Yes, they have gotten water in there, and I know their engineers, well, especially, we had those 2 floods in 2021, in July and September, September 1st and 2nd. And that was a 200-year flood, which certainly no one designs for that. But I do know that they've been working with their engineers on that, especially after that event, to analyze, figure it out. So certainly that's
So as they go through that plan, because I understand it's been flooding ever since then, with rainstorms we've had in the fall and this winter, will are they, I mean, I hope they're taking into consideration how their flood mitigation will impact that Vivalas Leary's strip, because I would think it would only go towards them and perhaps make it even worse. I mean, maybe they mitigate it, it goes around and it ends up in, Vivalas, but it's a concern for sure.
Yeah, I don't have the number off the top of my head in terms of how much water their drainage system holds back. So I don't want to say 1 million or anything like that, because I don't know the number for sure. Certainly that area in Heights Road is the low spot. So the goal is to try to minimize the amount of water that goes to that low spot. And I know that that was a big concern in terms of trying to have their engineer look at it, and the town did hire an outside engineer to double check that work. So I'll have to look into that, Priscilla, in terms of ongoing issues with their parking garage, because that's the first I've heard. I did hear in the September storm, and I'll have to check into that.
Yeah, that was my other question. I mean, I know they're, building inspectors and electrical inspectors and all of that, but how often do you actually inspect, a drainage plan, being it residential or commercial? Because I know that states changed the laws a lot, even in the last 10 years, in terms of what is expected. So how often, once it's implemented and built, does the town actually go check that?
Well, in terms of drainage systems, we do require that the applicants put together what's called a drainage maintenance plan in terms of what they have to do, cleaning catch basins and inspecting things. So that's incumbent upon the applicant. The town did hire someone, or make Federal Realty hire someone during the construction process to oversee the installation of these, especially the drainage systems. So that's important as well. You're right, two issues. One is it being installed properly? And two, is it being maintained? Certainly, after that September storm, we did get areas where there were problems, and you go back and say, okay, what is the problem here? And as you know, Public Works is looking at a number of areas in town in terms of areas that shouldn't have flooded, that did flood, and we've hired engineers to start investigating those. And I'm sure you've read about those in the paper, and those investigations continue. But for these private developers, they hire an engineer, the town has them hire another engineer at their expense to double check everything, and then maintenance. So
Thank you.
Sure. One other item I wanted to talk about, which is somewhat related to Federal Realty, but not really related, is the intersection of Neron Avenue and West Avenue, which I'm sure many of you have been hearing about for years and years. The town got a grant through the state to widen that intersection, put in a better traffic light, crosswalks, etc. The good news is bids have gone out. We've got a low bidder selected, and we are soon to start work out there. I'm guessing sometime in May. We expect that the work will be completed before the end of this year. If all goes well, Thanksgiving. It's about a 6-month job. So you will start to see widening out there, new sidewalks, crosswalks, handicap ramps, etc. So that's good news. That intersection, when you are sitting at that, and I was just out there last Tuesday, waiting to make a left turn from Neron onto West. And because the guy in front of me was turning, I couldn't move. So it will be better. I promise you that. So that's good news. In a year from now, you'll wonder how you lived this long with that terrible intersection. So it's on the horizon. That's the good news. But there will be, like with any construction project, a little inconvenience throughout the summer and into the fall as they're doing their work. So just to give you a heads up, that's good news. What else do we have here? Let's talk a little bit about a Palmer project, Marone Heights Shopping Center. As you know, that project was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission in, I think it was 2017 or 2018. They were about to get started in early 2020, put the construction fence up, COVID hit, and we've been at a dead stop ever since. They've come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission with changes to their plan. The most basic change, if you will, is a change from underground parking to above ground parking. Underground parking is much more expensive to construct. And as part of their new project, they've done some redesigns, some tweaks. The biggest change really is the proposed, I'll call it anchor tenant, which is the Goddard School, which is preschool. And this past Tuesday, the commission did approve the Goddard School. There was a lot of time and effort spent on traffic issues. And the commission did look at that. They did hire an outside traffic engineer to look at that issue. And they were satisfied that this is not going to be a problem. A lot of time and effort was spent on making sure the people at drop off had an adequate way to get in, to drop off their children. They talked about the play space for the children. And we are hopeful that can now get that project back off the ground and construction beginning. It will take a little while to get it off the ground, get the construction drawings going. That's what folks don't understand is, you can't come in the next morning and get a building permit. You have to then tell your architect, okay, how are we going to do this? Let's draw very detailed information about the new foundation and get a demolition permit, which usually takes about a month. So yeah, it's going to be out there for another couple months, but it's hopeful that they can maybe get started sometime this summer or early fall and get that whole thing revitalized, so to speak. So that should be exciting.
Are the stores that weren't where Heights Pizza was, are they going to end up staying now in the redesign and be updated?
They have not announced any tenants, so I do not know who might be staying, who might be leaving. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know.
I have another question. Some people in my district have asked about that traffic issue specifically. They feel wondering how they're going to do that because it's a very short space between Heights Road and Hollow Tree and West Avenue and Hollow Tree. And that's right where the school will be. And it just seems like it could be a real gridlock situation.
I did speak to a number of folks who had concerns. One of the very important aspects of this project is various road and traffic improvements that the Palmers have committed to make, and the commission has held their feet to the fire and says you have to make these improvements. And one of the improvements will be the widening of Heights Road. So going towards Hollow Tree, right now it's one lane. So you've all waited at that light, ready to turn left or right. It will now be 2 lanes. So that will reduce the amount of queuing that now occurs on Heights Road. The other thing the commission was very pleased and saw as a great improvement was the reduction and elimination, actually, not the reduction, the elimination of the back-in parking on Heights Road. You all remember going to Donut Inn or the wine store or whatever, where you pull in, or the post office even, and back right into Heights Road. And that was awful and dangerous and really held up traffic as people wait for someone to back into traffic. So that will be eliminated. They're doing a number of new sidewalks, crosswalks. I think they're improving the timing with the traffic light there, which is still not correct. So that should help things flow better once they get the timing of the lights better. So there are a number of related improvements. And what I compare it to is, and I'll pick on Mike Caslow again. In the old days when Howard Johnson's was at the corner of Ledge Road and Post Road, you may recall that intersection was terrible. And when Whole Foods came in, one of the requirements that the state of Connecticut made them do, again, Route 1 is a state highway, is substantial improvements. I think it was well over $1 million for Whole Foods to redo that whole intersection. So people forget how bad it was in the late 1990s when Howard Johnson had way, way less traffic, but it flows better now with the greater amount of traffic. So now Mike wasn't here before Howard Johnson's, of course. But so
I
think
did go
that's
there
what
as
we're
a
looking
kid
at.
though, so I'll go with it.
But I think that's what, the commission looks at is, look, there's going to be more traffic. It's tough today because with COVID, things are so different than they were. So we, as part of these traffic studies, they did account for, okay, here's the current levels. Bump it up because of COVID. Bump it up again because of just the nature of growth in Fairfield County. Then look at how many people are coming in and going out. But, again, these traffic improvements, whether it's Federal Realty or David Genovese at his Corbin District project, or the Palmers for Norotan Heights Shopping Center, these are essential parts of the program, whether it's drainage improvements, traffic improvements, whatever it is, that it's only because of these improvements that the commission is approving these projects. Without them, these projects aren't going to work. They would fail. So they're part and parcel of these larger projects, and they actually get traffic flowing better throughout town. So it's a benefit to the whole community. And I think, as I said, the difference between the amount of traffic at Howard Johnson and Whole Foods is ungodly. I mean, Whole Foods is at least 10 times as much traffic, maybe 20 times. But things are moving along better because of the improvements. So it should be good. You may recall when you think of that Norotan Heights area, there were only two restaurants. There was Heights Pizza and there was Jimmy Southside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Subway. If your family dines at Subway on this.
Yeah.
So things will be a lot different. There'll be more to see, more to do, more places to shop. It will be very exciting when it's complete. Brand new public plaza areas, places to sit and have a cup of coffee. Certainly there was Donut Inn, but it wasn't the most glamorous place to sit and have a cup of coffee with your friends. There was really nowhere to sit. It wasn't really even accounted for. There wasn't a place to go to get ice cream. After, you go to McGuan Field, let's go out for ice cream. There was no, now you'll be able to walk down. You may have all seen the giant staircase between Walgreens and the what they call the R3 building. So there's an area you can come, if you're at McGuan Field, you walk across West Avenue, down the flight of stairs, and there'll be an ice cream shop in front of Walgreens. Great, fantastic. So again, it's more to see, more to do. There'll be a little more vibrancy with people living there. There'll be a little seating area, one on Norotan Avenue. There'll be a lot of outdoor dining, which is certainly with COVID, that's the hot thing these days. So it will be very different than what you saw with Stop and Shop, Walgreens, or Darien Fabricare, Driver's Education Store. It will be different.
Okay.
A lot of change going on. What else do we have going on here?
Parklands.
Sure. Parklands was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission a few weeks ago. They approved a 60-unit building with 8 of the units being affordable. That has since been appealed, and we take it from there.
Okay. Can you talk about what the appeal process is?
Sure. The appeal process, in this case, it was neighbors who live within 100 feet of the property have appealed the decision. With any Planning and Zoning Commission, state statutes are very clear. The commission has to publish notice of their decision, and folks have 15 days from the date of the notice, not only neighbors, but the applicants. So if an applicant's unhappy, they can appeal a decision. So an appeal was received within 15 days, and now there's a return date. what happens is either the case gets settled or the judge makes a decision. So usually it takes a while to get a court date. The town prepares what's called a return of record, which is a copy of every paper submitted by everybody in the case. We submit the minutes, the transcripts. The judge gets the whole record. And as Mike Castello was saying earlier, some lucky judge gets to basically watch or listen to or read all the hours of testimony, all the hours of deliberation, and the judge will make a decision on one way or the other. And
Okay.
these types of appeals are not uncommon. We see them all the time, and the town just, if we can't settle them, the judge makes a decision.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from anybody on that? Okay. Okay, so that is an unfolding process as we speak. Okay. All right. Can you also now talk about some of the new proposed regulations? I mean, I know it took up a lot of our time and effort as a committee last year to follow some of the proposed state regulations, and now there's a new set that's been proposed. Can you give us the highlights and as you see how they might impact the town of Darien?
Sure. A lot of what we're addressing right now is I'll call it the outfall from last year's legislation, which was Public Act 21-29, which required planning and zoning commissions to do a number of things, including decide what to do relative to parking for multifamily dwellings. The commission addressed that last year.
Yep.
Eliminate any reference to minimum apartment sizes. The commission dealt with that last year. To figure out how they wish to address accessory dwelling units. The commission will be dealing with that later this year. So there was a lot of things that the commission did in response to that. There were other bills, Amy, as you've acknowledged. This year in the legislature, there were two bills that did not pass. One was, which you've referenced in the minutes, relative to the standards for a zoning board of appeals variance. There was a bill to loosen that a little bit. That, from what I understand, did not get off the ground. So that's one less thing we have to worry about. The other was relative to what Desegregate CT is called transit-oriented development, which would have been a requirement for all communities who have train stations or Connecticut fast track stations or permanent bus stations like in New Haven or Stamford to rezone properties within a quarter mile of those train stations, or half mile, I think it was. That bill did not pass as well. But certainly the densities, the amount of people that they were talking about rezoning, and it wasn't just rezoning, and I think that was the important thing. It wasn't only you have to rezone them, you would have to rezone them for allowing apartments as of right. So in zoning, there's really multiple standards. The easiest bar to jump over is as of right. If you own a house, a building lot in the town of Darien in a single family zone, you are allowed a single family residence as of right. You don't need to go to a board or commission to get approval. You just build the house. So this would have allowed apartment building as of right in certain parts of town. So you would need commission review, but it would be very difficult for the commission to deny it because it's permitted as of right, versus a higher bar to jump over, which would be the special permit standard, which is more difficult. So that bill did not pass. It may come back in the future. We never know with these things, but it's something we definitely had our eye on, because when you look at the communities that have train stations or Connecticut fast track stations, and I looked at a map, it's mostly, believe it or not, Fairfield County. And that's what we see with a lot of this legislation. It is targeted at Fairfield County. So that one wasn't targeted as higher density near downtowns or higher density on main streets. It was targeted towards basically the Metro North line and things like that. So even last year in 2021, they talked about that bill. It didn't pass last year. It didn't pass this year, which was a short session of the legislature. Next year is a long session of the legislature. I don't think I'd be wrong in saying more bills pass in long years than short years. So we'll see if it comes back and in what form, because it certainly would have an impact on many towns in Fairfield County, including Darien, because we have train stations. Prior bills said you have to rezone near all the train stations. And when I pointed out that Darien would be affected by 6 train stations, Talmadge Hill and New Canaan, Glenbrook, Springdale and Stamford, Rowayton and Norwalk, which all, if you look at a quarter mile, part of that's in Darien. Even though, as I explained to someone from, I think he's from New Haven, I said, most people don't swim the Neron River to get to their commute, but that would be the only way you would be able to get to that station. And he said, I don't care. So that at least gave me his perspective on how he felt about Darien. Then I said, it doesn't make sense to rezone that property. Those people do not go to Glenbrook to get on the train. I can tell you now, if you live on Hoyt Street in Darien, you don't go to Glenbrook or Springdale to get on the train. You go to Norotan Heights. It's quicker, it's shorter, even though it's not technically as the crow flies.
Yeah.
People don't drive or walk as the crow flies. They walk along streets. So again, we're always on the lookout and trying to respond as best we can, whether it's the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Selectman's Office relative to legislation that can affect town residents like yourself. I would encourage everyone to do the same, whether on any legislation, whether you're in favor or opposed, because these laws affect you day to day, whether it's relative to cannabis is another one the commission's going to have to deal with one way or the other. Accessory dwellings.
Is there a deadline by which Darien needs to decide whether they're opting out or to make their own policies on ADUs?
Yes, I believe it's, I think it's October of this year, plus or minus a month or two. So that creeps up ever closer. So while the state says to us, you have to deal with multifamily parking, you have to deal with eliminating minimum apartment, you have to deal with accessory dwelling units. Oh, and by the way, while you're doing that, why don't you write an affordable housing plan? And while you're doing that, why don't you deal with the day-to-day stuff you're dealing with?
Yeah.
But that's, it's easy to write the laws. It's tough to be able to respond. So planning and zoning meets nearly every week, usually 3 hours at a pop, as I was explaining to Mike, to keep up with the workload, much of which is being mandated by our friends in Hartford.
Okay. And last news that I'm sure the committee is aware of is that the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to approve us going into negotiations for a potential purchase of the Ziegler estate, not Ziegler estate, Great Island. So I know that that's a recent news this past week that everybody is probably aware of at this point. So that's just something that we need, if in fact the town is successful in that, then it would ultimately come to the RTM. So that's something that I would encourage everybody to keep your eye on. And obviously I will be feeding the group information as we get more. Okay. Am I missing anything that is on our group's radar? Any questions from the group for Jeremy? Anyone? Everyone's on mute. Just looking to see if there's any hands. Feel free to unmute yourself. And
now it's just to see what the unintended consequences are of the 3 developments, and there will be unintended consequences, and what the plan Bs are.
Yep, that's what's your hunch, Mike?
The concern that we had a district meeting the other night, interviewing new candidates, and other than dealing with Hartford, the 4 other members' biggest concerns were, have we overdeveloped in our enthusiasm? And, we're not going to know that for 3 years.
Yeah.
But there are always, in everything, there's unintended consequences, things that weren't anticipated, that's part of life.
The other side of that coin is what might have happened had we not.
Yeah.
There's always so there's always 2 sides of every coin, to say what potentially would have been developed in its place.
And no one was against it. It's just, what are the surprises that are going to come out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Relative to that, Jeremy, what is the total number of new dwelling units between the 3 developments? 3 being Parklands, Federal, and Corbin?
I think it might be,
Approximately.
Federal's 122, Corbin's 116, Parkland's 60. Does that sound about right? And Palmer's
about
is
right.
about 80.
that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's
Yep.
about it.
That's correct.
I think that's about the numbers. Yep.
So about 400 units.
Compared to when Avalon came on, Avalon had
189.
189. Yeah.
And their 5-year ends next year. They go to fair market next year.
No, Avalon was built in 2000, 1999, 2000. I think they had 30-year deed restrictions, Mike. I'd have to double check. So, geez, yeah, I think they have 8 years left on
Yeah.
those deed restrictions. I think I'd have to double check, but rest assured, they know. They know the date.
Yeah. What's also very interesting is obviously all of these units are walk to a train. Not to say that that's the only pattern and traffic pattern that happens in with those residents.
With
But yes,
except 3 Parklands.
pardon me, except Parklands, yes. Yep, thank you for that clarification, except Parklands. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how things develop. Yep. Okay. Any other questions from the group? Sandra?
I was just hoping Jeremy could just give us an update on Darienne's current moratorium on 830G.
Yeah, certainly. That's a good question. We have had a number of projects coming through. The most significant one was the Royal at Darien, which is corner of Post and Academy Street, which increased that development. It used to be 30 units and now it's 55 units. So that was an increase of 25 affordable units. So that was the most significant change we've seen since I think the last moratorium in 2016. Certainly there's other smaller projects. And I think one of the keys here, which we talked about with, for example, David Genovese, his project won't be complete for what year are we in? 22, 23, 24 or 25. So Federal Realty will finish first. They're going to finish in 2022 or 23. David will be, I'll call it the second finisher in 2024 or 2025. The Palmers have not even started yet. So they are, let's call it best case 3 years away, 2025. As you know, Parklands, they're in litigation. So even if they were to start tomorrow morning, it's 2 years. So certainly we've got a ways to go till any of those projects are complete. So we're not even counting at this point, Sandra, because to get a moratorium, for the first one, we needed 136 points. For the second one, we needed 141 points. And that's on that webpage I showed before, or explained, darienct.gov/AH plan. At the very bottom of the page, it talks about that. So Certainly till these projects are complete, nothing's going to happen. The other one that was built was Leroy West, which is at the corner of Leroy and West Avenue, of course. That was 5 affordable units. We do await these 2020 census numbers for housing. Will set the number for how many points we need. We expect that number of housing units to come out later this year. We need 2%. The number of points is 2% of the number of housing units in town. So for example, last time we had, we'll call it 7,100 units in town, and thus we needed 142 points. So we will certainly have more units in Darien than we did in 2010. And that will raise the bar. Of course, therein lies the problem that Hartford keeps creating, is they keep moving the bar higher and higher. So while we jumped over the bar in 2010, they moved the bar up as a result of 2010 census. Then we had to jump over the higher bar. 2020 census, we're going to have an even higher bar to jump over to get a moratorium. So therein lies, it gets harder and harder. No town that I'm aware of in the state of Connecticut, there's 169 communities. I am not aware of any community that has achieved 3 moratorium. Darien has achieved 2. I think Berlin or Trumbull might have achieved 2. Maybe there's one other community, maybe 2 others. So we are the leaders of the pack. And we are hopeful that we can continue to say setting a good example is the wrong phrase, but you get the point. Keep moving towards the goal. So we are a ways away. Certainly these projects will count towards the moratorium, but they're not going to be done this year.
Jeremy, in any of this conversation towards land use, is there any recognition of how much land in Darien is used towards I-95 and rest stops on I-95? Is there any credit given to land that is within Darien's, perimeters that are earmarked and used for the town, the state of Connecticut?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
There is no accounting for, the fact that Darien has wetlands or flood zone or is low lying. What people we've talked about at many meetings is the fact that New Canaan sits north of Darien. It's higher. New Canaan is just higher than Darien. New Canaan's water flows into the Neron River and the 5 Mile River and the Goodwives River and maybe even Stony Brook. So right now, it's raining in New Canaan, and tomorrow morning, that water that's falling in New Canaan now will be in Darien. Darien's water does not go to New Canaan. New Canaan's water comes to Darien. And I'm not picking on New Canaan, but that's just the way it is. Some of Norwalk's water goes into the 5 Mile River. Some of Stamford's water goes into the Neron River.
Mm-hmm.
Some of New Canaan's water comes into Darien through its rivers and streams. But Darien's water does not go into New Canaan. So the state does not account for that either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions for the group? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It's been just about an hour. We've covered a lot in an hour. Jeremy, thank you very much for summarizing in a very succinct fashion, and thank you everybody for your questions. Our next RTM meeting is the 18th, correct?
Correct.
Yep, correct. Our next planning and zoning meeting is at the end of the month, which will be predominantly reviewing some budget issues, which really, we don't have a lot of budget review for the town for our particular planning and zoning and building. It's been, very, very static year over year. We don't have any major issues coming up that we need to account out for and report out for. Okay, given that, can anyone make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, Kurt, and a second?
Second.
All right, Priscilla, thank you. At that, it's 8:27 and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeremy.
you.
Good night.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.